Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the DJOP Judicial Roundtable. My name is Jill Zippin. I am chairwoman of Democratic Jewish Outreach Pennsylvania. We're the only Jewish Democratic PAC in the state of Pennsylvania. We support candidates for federal office and candidates for statewide office that best reflect Jewish values. Today we are here to learn about the judicial candidates running in Pennsylvania for Pennsylvania's Supreme Court, Superior Court, and for Commonwealth Court. This evening will be moderated by Judge Abraham Gaffney. Each judicial candidate will give a brief opening statement, followed by Q&A. We encourage you to put any questions you have for these candidates into the chat. I'm going to begin with some introductions. I'm going to introduce our moderator, Judge Gaffney. Judge Gaffney, besides being the very first judge I was ever in front of in my legal career, was a judge at the Court of Common Pleas of Philadelphia, and he served as the court administrator there for 2 years. He's lectured on various legal topics to the United States Department of Justice, the American Law Institute, the American Bar Association, the American Judicial Society, the Federal Trade Commission, the National Institute for Trial Advocacy, the PA Bar Institute, among many others. He's lectured in Israel at Tel Aviv and Haifa University Law Schools. He has taught courses at Temple and Villanova Law School, where he was a professor at Villanova Law School. He's been active in numerous professional and civic organizations, including serving as vice chair of the Supreme Court Appellate Court Procedural Rules Committee and as chair of the Pennsylvania Bar Association's Alternative Dispute Resolution and Professionalism Committees. And as chancellor of the Louis D. Brandeis Law Society Foundation. So we have an amazingly experienced moderator for this evening. We have with us tonight Judge Dan McCaffrey, who was an assistant district attorney in the Philadelphia DA's office. He went into private practice, where he spent 16 years as a civil trial attorney. In 2013, he was the top vote getter in the election for the judge of Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas and presided over 100 jury trials and thousands of bench trials. In 2019, he was the top vote getter, this time for judge of the Superior Court, where he's currently a judge. And he is currently the supervising judge for wiretaps and was selected by the Supreme Court to serve on the Court of Judicial Discipline. And he's been a lifelong active Democrat. Jill Beck has dedicated her career to ensuring that all Pennsylvanians have access to justice. She was raised in Pittsburgh, and while pursuing her undergraduate degree in criminal justice from George Washington, she served as a counselor at a residential facility that dealt with delinquent girls and was an assistant forensic interview at Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh. She also served as an AmeriCorps Fellow. She graduated at the top of her class from Duquesne Law School, and she worked for the nonprofit Kids Voice that helped neglected and abused kids. She spent the next 10 years in public service as a law clerk under the Honorable Christine Donahoe on the Superior Court and the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, and she currently lives in Pittsburgh with her children and her dog. Judge Tamika Lane serves in the Court of Common Pleas of Philadelphia County, first being elected in 2013. She was assigned to the Major Trials Program in the Criminal Division, where she supervised human trafficking cases. She presided over a variety of criminal cases. She is a West Philadelphia native and a proud graduate of Howard University. She graduated law school, Rutgers Camden. She also, prior to being a lawyer, taught social studies. After graduating law school, she served as a law clerk in the Court of Common Pleas and then protected young people in her community as a certified child advocate. She has a commitment to justice and serving the most vulnerable residents. which led her to join the Defender Association. Judge Lane served West Philadelphia in Harrisburg as chief legal counsel for state senator and the executive director for the Pennsylvania State Government Committee. And lastly, we have Judge Matt Wolf, who is the currently supervising judge of the Philadelphia Municipal Court. He guided the court through the pandemic. He is the architect of the eviction diversion program, lauded as a national model that keeps tenants in their home. He has 25 years experience as a trial lawyer involved in civil rights cases. And he is as well a highly decorated 20-year veteran of the U.S. Army who served honorably as a captain in the Army JAG Corps in the combat zones of Iraq, Afghanistan, and earning a Bronze Star Medal. So they are all the candidates for Supreme Court, Superior Court, and for Commonwealth Court. And I now turn the program over to Judge Gaffney, who will ask each of the candidates to say a few words. Judge
okay, Gaffney. Well, thank you, Jill. And one of the things about no longer being a judge, it's really refreshing to be able to tell a few judges they have to be brief. So you don't get a chance to do that very often. I will be asking questions of the judges, but we would like each one of you, if you could, to just give just a little brief introduction about what you want to say, although I suspect my questions will go into some of the same areas. And I do want to warn you, when I ask questions going around the four of you, I won't necessarily be going the same order each time, because it's not always fair to ask one question and one person hears it first and then a second. So I'll alternate my order of asking questions. In any event, I would like to open it up and ask each one of you, and I'll call on you, just give a little introduction as to what you would want to say to this group at this time. And I'll start with Judge McCaffrey, please. Judge McCaffrey, did he get back? Okay.
Judge McCaffrey just had to speak right now. He'll be back on here in less than about 2 minutes.
Okay, well then I'll then turn it over to Ms. Beck.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Billy.
Hi, Joe.
Thank you very much, Judge. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jill Beck. I'm from Allegheny County, running for Superior Court. The Superior Court is a court of appeals. It hears criminal, civil, family, juvenile, and orphans court cases. Those are all areas where I've practiced as a lawyer. I've practiced in the Superior Court itself, as well as in appellate courts across the country. And I spent 10 years clerking on the other side of the bench, 6 on the Superior Court, 4 on the Supreme Court, where I drafted over 500 of the very decisions I'll get to decide if elected to the court. So I know the court, I know the law, I'm passionate about the work that the court does, and I'm also passionate about the people that come before the court. I've largely dedicated my career to public service and to helping vulnerable and underserved members of our population. I started my legal career nearly 20 years ago representing victims of child abuse in Allegheny County. And then after my clerkship, I joined a law firm, Blank Rome, in the Pittsburgh office, where in addition to my commercial litigation and appellate practice, I served as chair of the Pittsburgh office pro bono department. That allowed me to do work representing victims of domestic violence, victims of racial discrimination, illegal gun sales, and wage theft, members of our LGBTQ community, veterans, help with people facing housing insecurity, election protection, and generally help people without money get the same rights and protections as people with means. I've been highly recommended by the Pennsylvania Bar Association to be a Superior Court judge, and I'm very much looking forward to being here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And now Judge Tamika Lane.
Hi, how are you?
Okay, well, okay, we can see you now. Go ahead.
Okay, good. I thank you so much for convening this forum to talk about the courts. It means the world to us to bring more attention to this judicial election. My name is Tamika Lane. I'm currently a judge on the Court of Common Pleas, where I was elected a decade ago, along with Judge McCaffrey. Before that, I was a public school teacher. I was a public defender. I was a major trials attorney there, where I tried complicated and complex jury trials for adults. And I also did bench trials, also known as waivers, for adults as well as juveniles. I was a child advocate. I did civil arbitration. I sat on a panel of 3. After that, I was able to be chief counsel for State Senator Anthony Hardy Williams, and I was the executive director for the State Government Committee. As a judge, I have made sure that my courtroom is a place where everyone knows that their voice will be heard, regardless of where they live, with how much money they make, if English is their native tongue, what religion they practice, who they love. None of that matters, because I firmly believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect and equal under the law. And that's how I run my courtroom, as the presiding judge for the human trafficking cases, as well as doing family violence cases. That's sexual assaults, horrific and heinous domestic violence cases. And a lot of those sexual assaults have been against minors. So I really have prided myself in that before I went on to civil. I currently sit in the complex litigation section in the civil department. I too am highly recommended by the Bar Association, and I have dedicated my life to being a service to others. My grandmother had a saying that it is not about you, honey, or child. She would use that last word interchangeably, but the gist is the same, that it's not about me. And me running for Superior Court, it's not about me. It is about us, and making sure that everyone in Pennsylvania can be their free, authentic selves and have their rights protected. So thank you so much.
Fine, thank you. Now, Judge Wolf, last I saw him, he was in a car somewhere, so his face
Yes.
is bouncing around. Where are you?
Yes, I'm still in a car. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Matt Wolf. I'm a judge on the Philadelphia Municipal Court. I supervise the civil section, which is small claims and landlord-tenant, and I sit in criminal and civil. I've heard more landlord-tenant cases than any other judge over the past 5 years as supervisor of the civil division. My career for 25 years was as a trial attorney. I was a plaintiff's trial attorney. It evolved into me being a civil rights lawyer. So I represented people who were making claims of discrimination and oppression against employers and the government. Many of my clients were women who were suing for sexual harassment, quid pro quo, hostile work environment, wrongful termination, many pregnancy discrimination cases. I also represented whistleblowers, racial discrimination cases, as well as police misconduct, excessive use of force, racial profiling, wrongful arrest. I was a trial attorney. I tried the cases myself if they didn't settle, and I either defended or prosecuted the appeals myself. I have an interesting race right now where I'm a 5-year experienced judge, 5 years plus, and 25 years as a trial attorney. And I'm running against a candidate for the Republican Party who's never tried a case, never prosecuted an appeal, and has not been a judge. So that's a little bit about me.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Did Judge McCaffrey get it back from his speaking engagement? Do we know?
It does not look like he has, Judge Gaffney. So maybe just go into the Q&A, and when he comes
Oh,
on.
okay. Well, I'll have just some other questions I can ask that might be a little more helpful. I'll go back to the 3 candidates we have here. Let me ask you, and I'll start with you, Judge Wolf, and I'll go backwards. People hear about the Supreme and the Superior and the Commonwealth Court, and frankly, I don't know how many lawyers we have on this, but they're not really aware of what the differences are among those courts. So can you, Judge Wolf, give us a little bit of a sense, what's the Commonwealth Court all about? And then I will ask Judge Lane and Jill Beck to tell us a little bit about the Superior Court. So tell us, what's the Commonwealth Court? It's a relatively new court in the Commonwealth history. So what does it do that's different from the others?
Sure, I think it's from about 1968 on. It hears claims against the government, mainly. Definitely claims against the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but also appeals from administrative agency heads. So workers' comp, zoning, planning. It really touches on people's lives in a broad manner, and has systemic and societal impacts in rulings. So for instance, reproductive rights is going to be dealt with in the Commonwealth Court. The court is a little bit odd in that it's not only an appellate court, it's a trial court. So for instance, in about February of this year, after a 3-month trial with a single judge, the court issued an opinion that the funding of education in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania was not equitable and violated the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and directed the legislature to come up with a funding system that made it equitable. These are the kinds of cases that go before that court, and it hears thousands of cases. It also hears union grievance matters that are after an arbitrator ruling going up through the appellate process, and workers' comp. It's a high volume court, hears thousands of cases a year. The Supreme Court will take appeals from the Commonwealth Court, but the Supreme Court only hears about 150 cases a year and has broad societal impact in the ruling, whereas the Commonwealth Court hears thousands of cases and is the ultimate authority on cases that are not further appealed. For instance, the educational funding case, where the court determined that it was inequitable, was not appealed. So that's a final ruling. And that's currently being discussed by the legislature in hearings throughout the state at this time. So I'll leave it to the Jill and Tamika to talk about the Superior Court. I'm sure that they would be far more articulate in talking about the office for which they're running.
Okay, and I'll go backwards as I said I would. So Judge Lane, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the Superior Court is, and Ms. Beck, she'll fill in whatever she leaves out. Okay. So
Sure, thank you. Yeah, and if you don't mind, Jill and I can just tag team it like we do all around talking about the Superior Court. But that's often the final stop for most people in Pennsylvania because the Supreme Court just won't hear their cases. So the Superior Court deals with criminal matters, family matters, anything dealing with juveniles, civil matters, as well as wills and estates and orphans court, as it's called. And this is, if you go to trial in a court of common pleas, you have an absolute right to appeal, and those appeals go to the Superior Court. So the Superior Court pre-pandemic heard around 8,000 cases a year, and now it's probably around 6,500, but it's still one of the busiest, if not the busiest, appellate court in the country. Jill, did you want to add anything?
You want to supplement that?
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly right. So, what we're talking about is someone's right to be free from incarceration, their right to parent their children, their right to their health, their wealth, their safety, their home, their inheritance. These are cases that affect everyday Pennsylvanians every day. And as Tamika said, the Supreme Court does not grant allowance of appeal to all the decisions. So as she said, we decide about 6,500 decisions a year in the Superior Court. We do error correction. We look at the facts of the case. We decide if they are supported by the findings. The judge's findings are supported by the record. And we research the law to make sure it was correctly and faithfully applied. The Supreme Court does not do error correction. It is a policy-making court that sort of does more big picture constitutional issues. There is a gatekeeping function to that court. Whereas the Superior Court decides 6,500 decisions, the Supreme Court decides about 150. So about 98% of the cases end in the Superior Court. And I will also say that on all of these courts, whether you're the litigants or not, your rights will be impacted because our appellate courts are interpreting our laws and our Constitution. So a law that did not adversely affect you yesterday very well could adversely affect you tomorrow.
Thank you. I assume Judge McCaffrey's not there yet, so I'm going to just ask the two of you, to Jill Beck and Judge Lane, because someone asked a question for everyone.
Judge McCaffrey just joined. He just joined.
Oh, did he?
Judge Gaffney. There he is.
Hi, Judge. Sorry about that. I don't want to interrupt you.
So let me tell you what's been happening. Everybody else has been talking about why they should be running for the Supreme Court. So now we need you to help us. And what I really wanted is a little bit of a background about you, both non-legal, non-judicial background, and advise us what you're seeking here, and then I'll ask you a few more questions. But tell us a little bit more about yourself personally, if you will.
Sure thing. That's kind of an easy one for me. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Judge Dan McCaffrey. I'm on the Pennsylvania Superior Court, having been elected to the Superior Court in 2019. I usually start off by telling people about my family background, and so people have an understanding of why I do what I do and why I was raised the way I was raised. I am the youngest of 7, born to Irish Catholic immigrants from Belfast, Northern Ireland. My mother and father came to this country to escape religious persecution after my father was beat into a coma by a sectarian mob. And he woke up 30 days later. He realized his career as a boxer was over, and he was fired from his job, and he understood that he wanted a better life for his children. So he looked at my mother and he did what all of our ancestors did, which is he got on a boat, he came to America to make a better life for himself and for his children. He settled in Philadelphia. My father became an organizer for the Printers Union in Philadelphia, and my mother got a job as a cleaning lady for the school district of Philadelphia. And she became a 26-year member of SEIU and a retiree from SEIU after being a janitor in the Philadelphia school district for 26 years. As the youngest of 7, I was born and raised in Northeast Philadelphia. I joined the United States Army at the age of 18. I enlisted and I served proudly on the 1st Cavalry Division of the United States Army. I was one of about 40 soldiers worldwide to be selected to attend the United States Military Academy. I attended prep for a year, and I decided at that point I did not want to make a career of the military. So I was honorably discharged. I attended Temple University and Temple University School of Law on a veteran scholarship. When I graduated law school in 1991, I accepted a position with the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office in 1991 through 1997. I served as a prosecutor. I was last assigned to the Major Trials Unit. I was what's called the SIU Special Investigation Unit Prosecutor, which handled all of the high-profile cases in the city of Philadelphia. I tried probably 60 or 70 jury trials, several thousand bench trials during my tenure. And in 1997, I went to work for 2 gentlemen that I'd worked for in law school by the name of Gary Jaffe and Bob Nemiroff. They had just started their own firm in Elkins Park, Pennsylvania. I'd kept in touch with them all during my tenure in the Philadelphia DA's office. And I rejoined the firm in 1997. I quickly became a partner in the firm. The firm ultimately was renamed Friedman Schumann, Nemiroff, Applebaum, and McCaffrey. I was the McCaffrey, obviously, as my partners used to call me, the Shabbos Goy. But I was at the firm from 1997 to 2013. I enjoyed every single minute of it. I became the chairperson of the firm's litigation department. I was a trial attorney for approximately 16 years. And in 2013, I decided to run for judge in the city and county of Philadelphia. I was elected judge, top vote getter in the city of Philadelphia. I was assigned to the criminal division, Major Trials Unit. I presided probably well over 100 jury trials and a few thousand bench trials and post-trial motions, pre-trial motions. And then in 2019, I was elected to the Pennsylvania Superior Court, where I have been ever since. While on the Superior Court, I've written over probably about 500 or 600 opinions. I participated in several thousand decisions. I was appointed by the president judge of the Superior Court to serve as the supervising judge for all wiretap applications in Pennsylvania. So my job, in addition to being a Superior Court judge, is to oversee all law enforcement wiretap applications in Pennsylvania. In 2020, it was my honor to be selected and appointed by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court to serve on the Court of Judicial Discipline. I have served on the Court of Judicial Discipline since that time. I am one of 9 judges who are responsible for being for all disciplinary matters against judges in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I have done that job for the last 3 years. I've enjoyed it immensely. It's an incredibly important job, preserving the integrity of the judiciary. In my spare time, I have 2 wonderful daughters, 2 wonderful grandsons. I am an active youth coach in the Philadelphia area. I'm also a lecturer at various law schools, including Temple and Penn, and the Duquesne School of Law. I also teach CLE credits on judicial ethics and issues like recusal and courtroom procedure and appellate procedure. So that's who I am. That's my experience. And that's why I'm running for the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, to bring those kind of experiences and values to the Supreme Court.
Okay, and thank you. And before you were on, the other candidates told us a little bit about the court for which they're candidates. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the Supreme Court does? Because as we know, it has responsibilities beyond just deciding cases that are on appeal. So can you give us a little bit of a sense what the Supreme Court is and what its responsibilities are?
Sure, Judge. The Pennsylvania Superior Court that I sit on now is what's called an error correcting court. Our job is to basically anybody who gets or takes an appeal from any of the 67 trial courts, we review those particular trials for error. And if an error happens, we fashion a remedy. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court's a different animal. It's more of a policy court. We handle on the Superior Court of roughly 6,500 appeals a year, the 14 judges on my court. The Supreme Court takes roughly 100 to 150 cases a year on what's called aliquotter, which is a petition for review. The Supreme Court's job is to clarify any murky areas of law, to change any existing areas of law which it feels needed to be changed. And the Supreme Court also has administrative functions to administer through the administrative offices of Pennsylvania courts, all 67 county judges, as well as the minor judiciary. So in addition to the actual job of the Supreme Court, which is to make the final decision on all areas of law, the Supreme Court has immense administrative powers. We also appoint literally hundreds of people each year to committees and assignments from the Supreme Court. And those committees include members like myself in the Court of Judicial Discipline, the Judicial Conduct Board, overseeing and regulating all of areas of law in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and regarding the practice of law, not just with judges, but also with attorneys.
Okay, and of course you have all sorts of other committees like appellate rules committees and criminal rules committees and civil rules committee. You have to oversee that.
Literally dozens of them, Judge.
Oh, I know that. I know
I'm
that.
sure you served on a couple during your time.
I did. I did. And let me go back to the two Superior Court candidates, because there was a question that was asked of everyone, but there may have been a little confusion because there are two of you running for Superior Court, and someone's asking, why are there two of you running for the Superior Court? May I vote for only one of them? They both seem very well qualified. So can one of the two of you or both of you, and let's see who spoke last. Okay, Jill, I'll ask you to go. You can do it, and then Judge Lane can do it. Why do we have two of you running, and what's that all about?
So when the only time that judges run in a contested election is when there is an opening on the court. And right now, at the end of this year, there will be two openings on the court. In fact, the court right now is made up of 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans with 1 vacancy. The second judge is set to retire at the end of the year, who is a Republican. And so if Tamika and I both win, we will flip the court to Democratic control, which will be the first time that has happened in distant memory.
Okay, Judge Lane, did you want to add?
So you can vote.
Did you want to add anything, Judge Lane?
I think Jill did an excellent job. Vote for us so we can turn this court blue to protect everybody's rights in Pennsylvania. Democracy started here in Pennsylvania, and that is what we're running for, to uphold everyone's rights.
Listening to the two of you, it doesn't sound, if you're on the court together, we're going to hear any dissents from each other's opinions, but let's see what happens. Okay, let me go on from there. What I want to ask you is, and we've all seen in recent years candidates for like the Supreme Court of the United States, and they're usually asked by the people in the Judiciary committees grilling them what their judicial philosophy is. Now, we know we can't ask you how you would decide an individual case. We can't ask that of any of you. But is there anything you can say about a sense of your judicial philosophy and how it might affect your decisions and what impact it might have on the decisions you make? And after we hear that, why should we as Pennsylvanians be convinced that that's a philosophy with which we would be benefited? So Judge Wolf, you haven't spoken for a while, so I'm going to give you that. All right?
So, my opponent, who has not tried a case as a lawyer, says that she is a strict constructionist. And that is basically a signal to all the Trump supporters that she's going to be against reproductive rights. She is endorsed by pro-life organizations as well. So all of the Democratic are endorsed by the Planned Parenthood of Pennsylvania PAC. As far as my judicial outlook, I'd rather just talk about my background and my track record, because I think that if I talk about what I'm going to be like, it's less accurate than saying what I've done. And, first of all, I'm a liberal Democrat who was a civil rights attorney for plaintiffs, representing people to vindicate rights. And as a judge on the Philadelphia Municipal Court, I have been working for the past 2.5 years with the National Center for State Courts under a grant from the Pew Charitable Trust on equity and access to justice, making the court better. Big issue in my race is because the Commonwealth Court is going to deal with all the culture war issues. So reproductive rights, marriage rights, education, equity, voting, they're all going to come through the Commonwealth Court before they go to the Supreme Court. The Commonwealth Court is co-equal with the Superior Court. The Commonwealth Court is above the county courts, the Court of Common Pleas. So as far as judicial outlook goes, I'm somebody who wants to preserve civil rights and protect rights under the Constitution of the United States and Pennsylvania. We've seen with the Dobbs decision that the Republicans want to go back to 1970 and roll back Roe v. Wade. And the only question going forward is, how much further back do they want to go? What other rights do they want to take away? And there are 9 judges on the Commonwealth Court. Currently, there's a vacancy. So there are currently 8 sitting, 5 are Republicans and 3 are Democrats. If I'm elected, it'll bring it closer to even. The president judge is a fairly moderate Republican. So if I'm elected, it makes a big difference, because if another vacancy occurs, Democrats could actually achieve a majority on the Commonwealth Court, which has not happened in, I don't know how long, but a really long time. So that's what I would have to say on that.
Let me go then to Judge McCaffrey. Judge McCaffrey, if someone were to say to you, without asking about a specific case, but if we would try to figure out what your judicial philosophy or theory is, what would you say about yourself?
Judge, I've been asked that question many, many times, and I tell people the same thing. My judicial philosophy is pretty simple. It's just to get the matter right. As anybody who's actually served in the judiciary understands, your kind of approach to cases varies from court to court. When I was a Court of Common Pleas judge, your job is to basically, apply the rules of evidence to the civil procedure rules or criminal justice rules, and to allow each side to kind of have a full and fair opportunity to present their case or present their defense. On the Superior Court, it's a different kind of approach. Your approach on the Superior Court as an error correcting court is really to review the record for the claimed error and to apply the applicable standard, whether that standard is de novo review, whether it's abuse of discretion, or an error of law. And if you find that there's an error of law, your job is to fashion the appropriate remedy. I've said that one of the interesting things about my court on my tenure on the Superior Court is that as an error correcting court, our job is to apply the law as it's set down from the Supreme Court. There have been many occasions during my time on the Superior Court, and several of my opinions have pointed this out, where I've actually looked at the outcome of a case, or I've looked at a particular area of law, and I've thought that this really is an unequal application of the law. It's an unfair disposition. But because of the existing nature of the law, I'm constrained to follow the law. However, in those instances, I've often pointed out to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court that I think this is an area of law that the Supreme Court should take a look at. To my delight, the Supreme Court has actually accepted my invitation on about half a dozen occasions and changed the law for the betterment of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. On the Supreme Court, my approach is very simple. When you're dealing with statutory construction, what you really want to find out is you want to determine what the actual intent of the statute is. If you're talking about a constitutional law issue, my approach is going to be very simple. I'm very protective of individual rights. I approach the Constitution as a living document, not from an originalist standpoint. I believe that the Constitution was intentionally created by our forefathers using very broad language, so it could be adopted to modern changes in the law and modern changes in society. And I think the Supreme Court job is to adopt the law and to adapt the law to those particular changes. So that would be my judicial philosophy.
Fine, thank you. And I'll ask, I forgot, of the Superior Court judges, I forgot who went first last time. I think Jill went first last time, and Judge Lane. Why don't you tell us, Judge Lane, do you have any thoughts on your philosophy as a judge, without being able to ask about any specific cases, obviously? You there? You're not there. Well, okay, Jill, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm here. Hi.
Okay,
Sorry. Yes, I would describe my judicial philosophy as engaged yet restrained. I think it's very important that as members of judiciary, we are actively looking at and ensuring the constitutionality of any statute or constitutional amendment that comes before the court. But the restraint comes in because we have an obligation to try to ensure that the legislative dictates and what they have, their intentions when passing the laws are upheld. It's a difficult thing for a judge to do, to try to intone what exactly somebody else meant when they said certain words. But we have very strict rules about how we interpret the laws. And, I would take those to heart and very seriously. Precedent is critical. And I am somebody who firmly believes in the applicability of precedent. And unless somebody challenges the applicable law, we should never touch it. We should never get involved in reviewing it unless somebody is challenging it. And
Okay.
sorry. And it's very important that when somebody does challenge it, that we recognize when a law has been longstanding and people have been relying upon it in their lives, that we have to really weigh that against the claims that are being raised. The judiciary is a third co-equal branch of government. We are not to just overturn statutes or laws willy-nilly, nor are we, though, to just rubber stamp decisions by any other branch of government. We serve as a check and balance of the executive branch and the legislative branch, and also of the courts below. It's a very important role. It's a heavy responsibility, but one that I know that I am ready to take on.
thank you. Judge Lane, I don't know, I couldn't get you before. Are you still there? Can you hear me? Yep, there you are.
Hi, yes, I'm here. I'm sorry. They called me to speak. I apologize.
Okay, well, I don't know if you heard, people have been talking about the philosophy, your judicial philosophy generally. I don't know if you want to supplement or you want me to go on to something else, because I can go on to another question.
It's up to you. I mean, but I kind of alluded to my philosophy
Right, I think you did.
during my introduction,
Mhm.
but I can expound upon it if you like. That I believe that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of your zip code, where you're from, who you love, what language you speak, what religion you practice. None of that matters. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, respect, and equal under the law.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask
Thank you.
another question, if I may, and that is, each of you is running on a Democratic ticket as a Democrat. Pennsylvania, unlike many other states, has partisan elections. If you're talking to the people on this group here that are watching you or people around the state, should the fact that you're running on a Democratic slate affect how voters think and why they should vote for you? And maybe yes, no, I don't know what the answer to that. So I'll start with Judge McCaffrey. Can you tell us that? You're running as a Democrat. Should that have any weight in this election with voters?
Well, Judge, I'm kind of glad you asked that question, because the answer from my perspective, and some of my running mates may feel differently, but the answer from my perspective is absolutely, unequivocally, 100%. One of the things that I've said literally from Erie to Philadelphia, from Scranton to Greene County and all points in between, that when you start talking about appellate judges, there's no Democratic or Republican way, we've often said this, to decide a case. But judges on the Republican side of things look at things a little bit differently than Democratic judges do. It's just, I think it's a fact of nature. And the example I've used to people all the time is, and I tell people this, and people need to understand it. The one thing I tell everybody is that majorities matter on our courts. The example I use, and you kind of alluded to this when you asked your opening question about the United States Supreme Court. I've told people for many, many years, Donald Trump ripped the Band-Aid in some respects off judicial elections. Donald Trump told the American public the type of person he wanted to appoint to the United States Supreme Court if he had a vacancy, and he told people why. And I think that came as a shock to the American conscience in some respects, because they couldn't believe that somebody was talking about judges in such a political sense. And Donald Trump had two keys to the United States Supreme Court: Justice Gorsuch, Justice Kavanaugh, and Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Now, I don't think anybody is ever going to argue that any one of them was unqualified to sit on the United States Supreme Court. They are supremely qualified. But they were also asked about their judicial philosophy, the questions you just asked about. They were asked about issues like Roe versus Wade. They were asked about women's reproductive rights. They were asked about labor rights, about minority rights. They were asked about LGBTQ rights. And each one of them had the same exact answer, which was they believed that those answers, or those issues, were settled. They were existing precedent. They were what we lawyers and judges refer to as stare decisis. And they would uphold those areas of law. And once they got onto the United States Supreme Court, we quickly realized that those laws were in existence and those laws were upheld right up until the majority of the court decided otherwise. The Dobbs decision was really eye-opening to American consciousness, because those three justices versus Wade, women's reproductive rights is settled law. They would uphold the law. And then the first opportunity they had to decide that particular issue, the Dobbs decision basically said there's no federal constitutional guarantee for women to have an abortion. That was followed up by decisions regarding the LGBT community. It's now literally illegal to discriminate against somebody based upon who they love. Stripped away.
I
use that as a corollary, as an example. And can you hear me?
No, I'm fading in and out. Are you folks having the same problem I am hearing? Yes, there's a little difficulty. I'm sorry, Judge. Maybe we'll get back to.
Sorry about that, Judge. Is that better?
That sounds better. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going through the mountains up here in northeastern Pennsylvania. My apologies. But I just kind of use that as an example, because the corollary is what happened in 2015 when three Democrats were elected to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court: Kevin Dougherty, Christine Donahue, and David Wecht. Those three justices were the justices responsible for a majority of Democrats on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Those three justices were the justices that made the decision to overturn the gerrymandered districts, which resulted in fair and equal representation in Pennsylvania, and the election essentially of 9 Democrats to the House of Representatives. Those three justices were the same justices who overturned the Commonwealth Court decision to basically throw the Pennsylvania election to Donald Trump. Those are the kind of decisions you get when you elect certain types of people who share your values to these particular appellate courts. I've used those as examples because those three Democratic justices, we know for a fact, if they wanted to, they could have redrawn districts and redrawn them to favor Democrats, but they didn't do that. They redrew fair districts, which resulted in a 9-9 election result in the House of Representatives, which adequately and fairly represents what Pennsylvania looks like. If you get judges who are going to be rubber stamps for a political agenda, the pendulum is going to swing both ways. You want fair and impartial judges who are going to equally apply the law and protect equality under the law, protect minority rights, protect LGBTQ rights, and protect women's reproductive rights. I know I'm not supposed to answer questions about how I would rule on any given case, but I tell people all the time, if we're electing judges in Pennsylvania, you have a right to know how a judge feels about those particular issues and the issues that are settled law under our law. I will protect and defend those rights, and I think Pennsylvanians have a right to know that.
Thank you. We're going to run out of time shortly, but one other question that people have asked, and Judge Wolf has actually addressed it, so I'm not going to address this to you, Judge Wolf, but people are asking, well, we hear about you and your philosophy and your thoughts. Why are you superior to the Republicans who are running against you? And Judge Wolf, I think you've given us some suggestions as to why in terms of experience and background and all. But can I ask Judge Lane to start and just go back to fill in who's running against you and why are you superior to them?
Well, the way I view it is that I'm not running against anyone. I'm running for something. And I'm running for the Superior Court based on my experience. And I will say this, I have been a public servant since the start of my career as a public school teacher. But if we fast forward to my clerkship on the Court of Common Pleas, and I think someone, I don't know if you guys answered it, but I saw in the chat, someone asked what was the difference between Commonwealth Court and Common Pleas Court. Common Pleas is the court that I sit on, and that's the trial court in Pennsylvania. I apologize for the noise. I tried to move to a quieter part of the building. But that's jury trials are conducted, and that's where you'll have your day in court, where the Commonwealth Court is an appellate court, but it's also a trial court. It's a hybrid. And I think Matt went and explained more about what the Commonwealth Court did. So as far as why I'm running for the Superior Court, it is based on my decades of experience as a major trial attorney. I tried thousands of cases between juries and bench trials or waiver trials, as they're called. I've also presided over thousands as well for both juries and bench trials. I've authored several hundred of opinions. I've often been cited by the Superior Court for my legal writing. And at times they've even made my day and adopted my legal rationale and reasoning. The Superior Court is often the final stop for most people in Pennsylvania. And I think it's really important who sits in these seats. Judges are elected for 10-year terms and often sit for 20 or 30 years. We need people who understand people. And I'll give you a brief story as to why I became a judge. As a public defender, I represented a woman who was on probation for something that was nonviolent, first-time offender. She had to pay restitution, $50 every month. She came in, she did not have $50. She borrowed car fare to get to court, and she had her baby. The judge thought it was ridiculous that she did not have $50. I only had $10 because I was a broke public defender, and I offered that up, and the judge thought that was extremely offensive and locked her up and said, call Child Protective Services to come take the baby. I asked the judge not to do that. Let me try to find someone from the family to get the baby. The judge said, you are the defender and so you are responsible for all the trials on my list, and I am not taking a break. So the judge said, I'll give you 1 hour, but you're going to continue with the list. I put the baby on my hip and I tried the case. When I was finished, the young lady's dad came and got the baby. But it's reasons like that that we have to make sure that the Superior Court, being an error correcting court, understands people, understands humanity, and sees what is going on in the courtroom. I can only control what happens in my courtroom, but not that of my colleagues. And the Superior Court can do that. They are an error correcting court that sets the law for Pennsylvania. It is a very, very important court. And it is imperative that we have judges who not only understand the law, but understand people and humanity. So thank you.
Thank you. Jill, do you want to add anything as to what to the question was why and whether you are superior to people who are running on the Republican ticket? Or why?
I mean, I think Tamika's correct. I mean, you look at the judges' experience, you look at the people who are running. There's a nonpartisan group that evaluates candidates, the Pennsylvania Bar Association. It's made up of 18 members, 12 lawyers, 6 non-lawyers. They do an incredibly detailed background check looking into our histories. They take writing samples. For me, they talk to all of my opposing counsel, and they give 3 levels of recommendations: not recommended, recommended, or highly recommended. And Tamika and I are the only 2 candidates in our race who are highly recommended by the bar. So I think there's an objective standard and an objective group that has kind of given that answer for us.
Fine, thank you. We have maybe 1 or 2 minutes before we finish with things. So someone asked a question. You're all running around the state, you're driving around, you're speaking from strange places, and there was a complaint that we don't hear about these judicial elections in news coverage, newspapers, public radio news, etc. Do you have any suggestions for the people who are listening into you folks right now as to what they can do to help this get on to the public consciousness so people know you're running? Anybody, any one of you want to talk? to that. I won't pick anybody. I only have 2 minutes left here.
Well,
Dan,
one of the suggestions I can talk about is public financing or the public financing of judicial elections. Sadly, Jill pointed this out a couple of times when she was speaking. We're trying to run across the entire Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. As you can see, it's right now in the 4 corners of the state, in the same jurisdiction that just got. Both of those individuals got elected by raising over $60–70 million. Judicial elections, literally, we're doing that on 1/100th of the resources. Sadly, our opponents are being financed almost exclusively by a Pennsylvania billionaire, the richest person in Pennsylvania, who has put $11 million into a judicial PAC and given directly to my opponent, in this case, my case anyway, $2 million directly, which is essentially 2/3 of her entire budget. That should tell people that in and of itself how important these races are and why the Republican Party is so hell-bent on taking back these particular election cycles. I used the 2015 election cycle kind of as an example. The Republicans have doubled down and they've dumped millions and millions of dollars. And unfortunately, Judge, as you know, the judicial canons preclude us from making any negative comments about any other person running for judge or running for office. So what they've created is they've created this kind of situation where they create these groups called super PACs or independent expenditure groups. And those independent expenditure groups are unconstrained by the judicial ethics, and they use them to funnel money through the campaigns and essentially attack us and run negative ads. They've been running negative ads against me for 8 weeks now. I wish I had a better suggestion than elected offices in Pennsylvania, but the fact of the matter is, the reason you see us running around the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania like we do is because they have a lot of money, but we have the issues on our side and we have a lot of friends. And we need to get our friends motivated. We need to get the people who believe in democracy motivated. We need to get the election deniers out of government. And we need to put people on our appellate courts who are going to do exactly what we say we're going to do, which is protect and defend your rights under the Constitution and not allow political partisanship to seek into our courts.
Okay, thank you. I think that Jill Ziffrin is telling me that we're at the end of our time and she has a final message for everybody.
Yes. First of all, I would like to thank everyone for being here, and please don't get off the Zoom yet. But I do want to thank Judge Gaffney for his wonderful questions and all the judicial candidates who are running around all over the place for being here tonight. Judicial elections are important elections. Voting rights, abortion, the environment, criminal justice reform, all those things are heard by courts and directly impact our lives. It is really important for you to talk to your friends and family about who these candidates are now that you've had the opportunity to meet with them. DJOP will be doing an ad campaign across the state, digitally and in newspapers in support of these fabulous candidates. We are a small organization, and if you would like to support us, go to djop.org, and all money given to us, we're an all-volunteer organization, will be used to support these digital and newspaper ads across the state. We need you so we can help these judges. Also, if you want to rewatch this, excuse me, it will be up on our YouTube channel, DJOP YouTube channel. Again, thank you all for being here, and please go to our webpage. We have many events coming up. You can support Susan Wild on October 22nd in Montgomery County. On November 1st, we will be hosting Governor Gretchen Whitmer in Philadelphia at 5 o'clock at a world famous restaurant. If you would like to attend, please go to our webpage. That's again November 1st. And the Joanna McClinton, the first Black woman Speaker of the House, will be introducing her. And if you're in Pittsburgh, we're having events on November 20th for Casey, and another event in November for Congressman Chris Deluzio. Again, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Judge Gaffney. Thank you all, judges, and onward to victory for our Democratic judges, and hope to see you on another Zoom soon. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Good night.
Good night.
All right.